Okay, welcome listeners. Here we are back again for another podcast called Compliance in Motion. We're really glad you tuned in today. We have a fantastic guest. This organization is dedicated to helping the greater Mahoning Valley and the manufacturers and people looking for careers in manufacturing. Everybody give a big welcome to Alex Hertzer, Executive Director of the Mahoning Valley Manufacturers Coalition. Alex, welcome to the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. And I didn't think that anybody could make compliance exciting, but when I saw compliance in motion, I mean, I was ready for today, man. But yeah, thanks for having me.
I'll tell you, we've been on a mission. We've been here at Ving. We've been working with customers coast to coast for 12 years now. And when we started, we thought, oh my gosh, this is such a serious subject. Everybody's always said, how do we get these, let's breathe some life into it and make it exciting. And when we decided to do the podcast, we were like, let's give it, some energy and focus and have some great guests like yourself on our program. So thanks for joining us and thanks for recognizing. We're going to try to make it insightful. We're going to leave our listeners with some tips today in how they can get their companies and or people they know connected with the MVMC. So Alex, for our listeners who may not know exactly what MVMC focuses in on and what their core mission is of the coalition. Can you share a little bit about it with the listeners so they can kind of wrap their heads around those two things?
Yeah, absolutely. So Mahoning Valley Manufacturers Coalition, Mahoning Valley is our geography. So we're here in Northeast Ohio, covering Trumbull, Mahoning, and Columbiana counties. We were founded about 15 years ago by local manufacturers. And I think that's really the exciting part of the story is that there were actual business owners, folks that were in each other's supply chains, competitors, and they realized 15 years ago that the primary limiting success in their business was going to be people. It was going to be a skilled labor, and it wasn't necessarily going to be raw materials or supply chain, and that we as manufacturers need to come together to start to work towards solutions, right? That government isn't going to come in and save us and save the day, but we truly need to work together. So at that point, they had about 12 manufacturers meeting regularly, brought in our former executive director, Jessica Borza, who now sits with the Ohio Manufacturers Association as the managing director of workforce, and just really mobilize things. I mean, really with a focus on developing accessible career pathways, both for students and adults in our region. I would say with a heavy focus on those entry level roles, getting into manufacturing, and then also those mid-skilled roles. So those in-demand machinists and welders and industrial maintenance technicians, supporting companies, whether that's through registered apprenticeship or other types of upskilling activities. And then really, also working at kind of a systems level. So, we coordinate a group of stakeholders in our community that focus on workforce. So all of our career and tech centers, our Ohio technical centers, four-year universities, K through 12, they're, focused on workforce. And we work with them to align what they're teaching and what they're providing to students with industry needs. So to really ensure that these students are well prepared when they leave.
It just seems like there's such depth and breadth of offering here, and there's so many different entities that people can tap into, whether you're a member or a candidate looking for a position. So it just seems like listeners, if you're in this, and if you're in on either side, and you're busy doing work, you're busy, you know, doing all the things that you need to do to figure out the landscape of what opportunity is out there is a challenge. And so you turn to an organization like MVMC, and they've got people and resources to guide you. One of the things that I think is interesting is that the program has grown, I believe, to 70 plus member companies strong. I mean, that's some serious momentum. What would you attribute the momentum to?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of FOMO that happens, right? That as other companies come along and they see those resources, and that's exactly it, is that being that extension for those manufacturers. I think there was I think the labor market drastically changed during the pandemic and then coming out of the pandemic, which has gotten employers to maybe think differently about how they engage with their community, how they recruit, where they recruit. And you know, it's always interesting to me, you know, growing up in the Mahoning Valley. I always tell folks our membership, you know, we serve companies like Schwabel's Bread, who's been baking bread the same way for 125 years, to Ultium Cells, who's making the batteries for future GM, you know, electric
Yeah.
vehicle. So yeah, it's always something different, but in a lot of ways, there's still a lot of commonality in those, you know, in those needs.
Yeah. So when somebody's out there like yourself, you must have been in a career in manufacturing at some point and had a skill set and all of this stuff going on, and then eventually found yourself being part of the MVMC. Give us a little bit of what was your journey? Where did you start and how did you get connected with the MVMC?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, so I won't take you too far back. You know, kind of coming out of high school, I really, honest to God, did not know what I wanted to do. College wasn't, you know, quite the best option for me, and I landed in restaurants. It was '08. It was, you know, the Great Recession. There really weren't any great jobs out there, and just kind of, you know, was figuring things out. I had a child at a young age. Long story short, I ended up you know, leaving the restaurant industry because of work life balance and, you know, all that kind of everything that goes along with
Right.
that lifestyle. Found myself in an hourly position, a mill operator at a facility here in Northeast Ohio, a roll form facility supporting the construction industry. I kind of fell in love with it. I learned a lot about myself. That I learned about how I learn. That I enjoy working with my hands. I enjoy troubleshooting and more spatial learning. You know, working on the machines, troubleshooting. Uh, Through that process, I was able to kind of pick up on things pretty quickly, and then was graciously promoted into a frontline supervisor position for a couple of years, leading the second shift. So for anyone, so pretty large facility, about 8 acres under roof, and just about 300 employees or so. But second shift is always where your green folks go.
Mm.
So a lot of time there spent on teaching, coaching, developing, you know, helping folks like myself that had no manufacturing experience and grow into these roles. And then from there, I moved into our plant superintendent role. So now overseeing essentially all of production and shipping, as well as our, you know, 7 or 8 salary managers. So now, you know, really getting more of the behind the scenes of the business and budgeting and planning and things like that. But still, you know, with a focus on team development and things like that. Our company is and was, or actually a board member now, a member of the MVMC. So as someone who was very excited about a career in manufacturing and kind of community minded already, I started to get involved with some of the MVMC's community outreach activities. We do a lot to work with students, whether that's, you know, big events like Manufacturing Day, or, you know, going into schools and talking to students. And as I started to learn and understand the mission and the core values of the organization, I realized really quickly that they also align with my personal kind of core values and mission. And what I tell people all the time is that I realize, as much as I loved where I was at and the team that I was building, I wasn't waking up every day excited to turn a wrench. I was waking up every day excited to help people
Right.
and to help them find those opportunities. So this opportunity here came up in discussion with our former executive director. I came on as an assistant director, handling more operations, day-to-day activities for the first couple of years, and then yeah, last year I moved into the executive director role, and I've loved every minute of it.
Well,
So
that's a fantastic journey, and I think for our listeners today, you know, there's a couple of different takeaways that I'd encourage you to zero in and dial in on. One, if you're somebody who's not, you know, you're graduating from high school or you've been working in another job and you just feel this pressure to kind of find the thing that's going to motivate you and take you forward in your career. A career in manufacturing can start in a lot of different places. And just like talking to Alex, when you start out in that career, you know, there's nothing wrong with saying that, you know what, this is the thing I want to do, and I want to just be really good at it and stay here and work on the manufacturing line and become an expert at,
Yep.
machining or whatever it is that your forte and skill set is going to be. But it doesn't have to be the position you retire from. There's all kinds of offshoots that you can take. Once you get those foundational skills down in whatever vertical in manufacturing, you start to see what really motivates you, just like what Alex tuned into. He saw himself more on the people side of manufacturing world and followed that path. Now, one of the things that MVMC does very well is they help people find careers. So just like Alex was on that journey and found himself as an executive director of the program, you could tap into the MVMC organization and help use their guidance to help you find your career. So, Alex, let's talk a little bit about that bridge between local people and manufacturing jobs. Can you walk us through how someone looking for a career should connect with MVMC and what to expect?
Yeah, no, that's really great insight, and you've definitely done your research, because that is definitely a big part of our mission. So, one of our flagship programs is called WorkAdvance, something I'm very passionate about because I, again, kind of aligns with my personal story. WorkAdvance for us actually started about 10 years ago as a national pilot. We were one of 4 locations nationwide that really wanted to test out how do we really get people equipped into jobs, in our case manufacturing, but how do we keep them there and working towards advancement, right? How do we move along those spokes that you kind of were just talking about? So what we have dialed into over those 10 years is, it's a short-term training program. It's about 4 weeks. We run it here in Youngstown. The Youngstown State University has a beautiful facility called the Excellence Training Center,
Mhm.
state-of-the-art facility, machining lab, industrial maintenance lab, robotics. We love having our students there because it really gives them an eye opener to all those other career pathways that they could, potentially see themselves in. But it's interesting, I think, the way that we work in the community and how we, to your question about how do we connect with our job seekers, with our residents, NVMC, our position is always going to be collaborative. And we know that there are organizations in our community that are already doing good work. Uh, to the same end, right? So we work through community-based organizations, primarily here in Youngstown, an organization called the National Center for Urban Solutions. And they literally go out to the community. They're knocking on doors, going to churches, barber shops, really wherever people are at, to like meet them where they're at. They're connecting with, maybe drug rehab facilities, probation offices, really looking to accomplish 2 things, right? In one case, how do we broaden the talent pipeline for manufacturers? Meaning, who are those? What are those populations that are not already engaged in the manufacturing workforce at the levels that they could be? So you think about women, for example, right? They make up 51% of our population, but only about 23% of the working population in manufacturing. So, how do we tap into that untapped talent? But then with also, uh, with the approach of supporting people into employability, folks that are coming out of substance abuse, disorders and things like that. Um, so then once we've recruited them and we've screened them and kind of gone through that, when they start training, we really start holistically, and we want to look at the person. So we do what we call a wheel of life activity, and what that does is it helps us to identify all the things in that person's life, like, have you been to the doctor in the last 7 years? Do you need new glasses? Do you have mental health things that you struggle with that maybe you need to get some more support for? So that's where we kind of start with individuals. But as they go through those 4 weeks, our
Hmm.
goal is to equip them both on the hard technical skills, like those things that maybe they're unfamiliar with because they worked at McDonald's or a pizza shop, but then also those soft skills, or what I would call durability skills, those really, truly those life skills, the communication, the emotional, kind of perseverance that it takes to make things happen every single day. So, yeah, while they're at YSU, they're doing everything from a math refresher Just even being able to read a tape measure and convert fractions to decimals is usually something that a lot of folks, including myself, sometimes struggle with. So we want to make sure we're prepared for that. They're also going through a ton of safety training. So talking about things like lockout, tagout, bloodborne pathogens, power industrial trucks, to get them in kind of that mindset of understanding their new environment. And then we're also doing like a hands-on dimensional tolerancing class, taking students through units of measurement, units of volume, and then finishing with the why, the tolerancing and why it needs to fit just that way. And then, like I said, the other half of that time is focused on things like conflict resolution. We also use it as a workplace simulation, understanding how to talk to your supervisor and things like that.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
yeah,
This is
so that's quite,
fantastic. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
quite a journey these folks take over the course of 4 weeks. Kind of coming from the situation maybe they're coming out of. And the exciting part though is at the end of the training, and I think what's unique about this training program is because MVMC is a membership driven organization, employers are kind of baked into this training program,
Mhm.
right? So we have a group of about 30 employers that actively hire from this pool of talent. We'll align them, specific manufacturers to the right class depending on what their hiring needs are at the time. But the employer will actually come in, they'll present to the participants. So kind of this unique opportunity for a job seeker, right? You don't
Mhm.
normally an employer coming to you first and saying, "Hey,
Right.
this is so great about working for me." And then they will usually have 2 to 3 interviews. We'll get them placed into a job. But then the key to all this is um, each individual that goes through the program also receives what we call career coaching for 12 months. So that career coach, we're starting in training with SMART goals, complete training, get your credentials, things like that. Pre-employment, we're helping to make sure things stay on track. Did you get your background check information in? Have you gone to take your drug screen? Things like that. As we're moving into employability, into post-employment, now we're navigating things inside the workplace, outside the workplace. My cell phone gets shut off. I had a disagreement with my supervisor. How do I navigate these things?
Mhm.
And then the last key point is that coach is also acting as a liaison with the company. So if John shows up late to work this week, the HR professional or the supervisor can call the career coach. Career coach can kind of dig in more of a personal way, meant to really root cause, right? So like,
Mhm.
does John have a transportation issue? Like he has a flat tire and we need to help support him in some way. Does John have maybe some time management that he needs to work on and focus on that we can
Right.
kind of coach him up? So it really goes back to what I started with, and how do we keep people working, both for our community, right? So how do we keep people gainfully employed, and then for our businesses, how do we help them to retain those employees so they can continue with high production levels and things like that as well.
This is absolutely a fantastic program. I will tell you that if I was in a position and I was looking for a job in manufacturing, my first stop would be your organization, without a doubt. I don't think people understand the depth and breadth of what you just walked us through as something that's available to them. Now, certainly when you were doing that voiceover, in the back of my mind as a business person, I'm thinking, who pays for all of this? So, as a candidate, coming to you, what would I expect as a financial commitment to get involved into your program?
For the participant, the training is completely free. So those 4 weeks of
I
training.
mean, listeners, take that and write it down right now, because I don't know who offers a program like Alex just described that not only is 4 weeks of concentrated skills development that are going to make you, uh, that are working in conjunction, in sync with people who, member companies who have already said, I want to hire people that come out of this program. That is
Yep.
golden right there. But then to have some mentorship for the first 12 months of your new career in manufacturing, this is a golden opportunity for people, right? So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but tell me a little bit about the expense and how, like for me, no charge, but how does this all work?
Yeah, and just to hit that, I mean, that is huge, and that coaching. I tell people all the time, every single one of us has that support system. To be successful, there has to be that outside support, and for folks that don't have that, within their, personal lives, yeah, having that coach is huge. So it's interesting you recognize that. So MVMC, we do collect membership dues, right? So we mentioned, over 70 plus manufacturing members, probably about 50 or so associate members, education, workforce development boards, community-based organizations. And member companies do pay those dues. So we consider hiring from WorkAdvance to be a benefit of membership. So there's no kind of additional cost to the employer to hire from this program. It's not a staffing agency, things like that.
Hmm.
Um, MVMC employs kind of a braided grant funding strategy to help support this work. So, in a lot of cases, federal agencies like the Department of Labor are favorable to organizations like ourselves and programs that produce the results that we just kind of talked about.
Hmm.
We work closely with state agencies as well for other types of funding streams there, and obviously our local foundation funders and things
Right.
like that.
Yeah, so it's a tremendous amount of focus put on the connection between people in our greater community here, which is what is the radius? Is it Mahoning, Trumbull? It's all Ohio based, or do you kind of go into the western side of PA, or how does that
Yeah.
work?
So the MVMC itself covers Trumbull, Mahoning, and Columbiana County. So those three we consider the Mahoning Valley.
So do I have
Uh,
to be a resident of those counties to participate in this program?
You definitely do not have to be a
Okay.
resident of the county, and a lot of times too, we get folks that are moving into, this
Oh,
community that
yeah,
are,
right.
I don't know where to find a job. I just moved here, things like that. We do. It is interesting. So we've always had kind of a bi-state relationship on the Western PA side. I would say most heavily concentrated in Lawrence and Mercer counties
Hmm.
in Western PA. So we've worked and supported employers. Similar work we've done. On the Ohio side, just no formal organization. But in 2023, there was interest from kind of the local workforce development board as well as a group of manufacturers led by the Elwood Group over there in Western PA that were seeking to form an organization modeled essentially after the MVMC. So our partner Julie Michael Smith has helped to lead
Hmm.
that initiative out there in Western PA. So we were able to get them established, get them as a 501c3. We went through a strategic planning process. And now we have a fully running, industry sector partnership. Not very creative, the Lawrence Mercer Manufacturing Coalition. So yeah, but it,
Yeah.
it
Hey, if
does
it
what it needs.
works, why reinvent the wheel, right? Yeah.
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 So yeah, it's still kind of in the nascent stages out there, but we're already putting together programming, pre-apprenticeship programs. We have all sorts of cool, new, exciting things we're doing with students on that side of the border as well.
That's excellent. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the member companies. And what would I expect if I was a local manufacturing group that's not currently involved in the MVMC? Help me understand, like, you know, what should I expect if I sign up to become a member? Is this like a static membership where you just sign up and you pay your dues and then you wait to find the candidates, or is this something where there's involvement, committees and programs and things like that I can be a part of to help boost the community and the focus on manufacturing and the geography that we just mentioned, and support programs? Talk to us a little bit about being a member company.
Yeah, no, that's being a member company. And what I tell folks all the time is that, you know, a lot of these companies, some of them are small, but there's a lot of folks working at these companies, and everybody, it's a company membership, right? So everybody in your company is welcome to engage with us in any way, anything they're interested in, right? Like I was the plant superintendent, but I wanted to be involved in the student outreach, right? So I
Hmm.
was at the student outreach. Plant manager, he was involved in other activities. But what you can expect as a member is one to be kind of fully integrated into the workforce and business ecosystem here in the Mahoning Valley. The way that looks is We do quarterly. We have large all member meetings. Those are very well attended. It's a great chance to like kind of get the updates and forward focusing conversations on what we're looking to get involved in. A lot of our members really find that peer-to-peer networking very valuable to be able to talk to somebody else that's in a similar situation, or maybe it's not even about workforce. Maybe it's, advancing technology or other types of machinery. Employers can also get involved. I think whether it's strictly for recruiting purposes or just even generally as to be involved in the community, we have a part-time team member dedicated to K through 12 engagement. So she has a whole calendar of activities all across the Mahoning Valley. Like I said, from big events like Silly Science Sunday coming up here at Oh Wow. We did probably about 6 summer camps this summer working with students. So those are all opportunities for your community engagement folks to get involved with our organization. Those are all opportunities to continue to build your brand awareness in the community. Those are all opportunities to engage students and start to change the way they think and feel about manufacturing. Then we also have other opportunities for employers when we're thinking about upskilling, right? So we talked a lot about those new workers and how do we find those new workers? Well, what about the folks that are already in our facilities? So, I work with a lot of companies
Oh, yeah.
one-on-one sometimes. So whether that's building and developing registered apprenticeship programs or other similar, upskilling programs, we do a lot of activity to connect employers with grant funding to kind of cover the cost of this training.
Okay, so
So,
just real quick, just to make sure I understand, because I was originally thinking, well, maybe just because we spent a fair amount of time talking about it, which was warranted, that the training programs and things like that that you do are for new candidates and not necessarily employees of the member companies. But it sounds like you develop programs for member companies to actually use with their employee base as well.
yep, yep, both
Can you
and.
can
So
you give us an example of one of those programs?
yeah, exactly. So, worked with a company Warren Thomas Steel Strip. They've been around for a long time out
Yeah.
there, and they had previously had registered apprenticeship. They've been in a shop for a long time, but had a heavy need for kind of this industrial maintenance technician, both on the mechanical side and the electrical side. So meaning, things like hydraulics and pneumatics competencies, as well as maybe PLCs and other electrical competencies. What we were able to do with Thomas Steele was one, we went through and vetted. So MVMC actually has registered apprenticeship models that we've already developed that are group sponsored, meaning any employer can kind of take part. So we reviewed that with the group there, with leadership, with union leadership. Um, we liked the core of it, but they wanted a little bit more multi-craft.
Mhm.
So we dug a little bit deeper. We worked with our local training provider. In this case, it ended up being the Mahoning County Career and Technical Center, to really dial in on the credentials that align with the competencies that they were looking to achieve.
Mhm.
We were able to broker a relationship where MCCTC actually came on site to the facility to provide the training. A lot of those trainers are actually mobile and they can take them with them. And then we were able to, like I said, kind of align all that to in Ohio. The big one is Tech Cred, stream of funding that supports, uh, uh, you know, credential earning of Ohioans. So, I think for the most part, we were able to get most of that cost covered and really develop this program.
So there's just a nice, literally, I'm picturing in my head this top 10 list of benefits for candidates and benefits for member companies. And then it's up to them each to kind of embrace path and kind of make the most of it where they're at, because you guys have these tentacles into all these different directions to not only create, scope out, validate, fund or seek funding, alignment to really breathe life into these programs, and make sure that they come to fruition. So just an absolutely fantastic program with a, I know for me, I knew a little bit about the MVMC, and I thought I knew about, like the first, what would you say, like 10,000 feet of it just from being
Yeah.
exposed to it. But I just found out today through our podcast that there's another 40,000 feet that I had no idea that you guys were all involved in. So, listeners, today, if you didn't hear us talk about something during the podcast that spiked an interest for you in manufacturing, we're strongly encouraging you to reach out to your organization here in the Mahoning Valley and talk to them. One, it may just be something that we didn't talk about today, but also it might be something on the horizon, that's something that's coming out. So let's talk a little bit about that. If you were to look forward, Alex, kind of maybe in the next 3 to 5 years, what do you think the biggest challenges are, or the biggest needs are going to be emerging that you guys are starting to think about today, but maybe you don't have the full program in place, but you're like 3 to 5 years in the Mahoning Valley in our areas, man, we have got to adapt and align with these kinds of needs. Can you give us some insight into what the future might look like?
Yeah, I think the future and it's gonna happen pretty rapidly, like you said, the next 3 to 5 years. It's gonna all be focused on robotics and automation, right? Our facilities are gonna have to start reinventing themselves to become more efficient, to alleviate those, workforce development is my life. There are a lot of kind of tedious jobs within these facilities that, to be honest, folks just don't want to work, right? Like they want higher skill sets, they want
Right,
higher wages, right?
right.
Um, so I see that as a driving force. I think especially in the Mahoning Valley, we have a lot of local family-owned businesses, and now we're getting to that point of succession, and in a lot of cases, those next generations either aren't interested or maybe don't have the capacity or the skill set to take on that business, and then what happens next as they go to sell those businesses, and unless we invest in the hard infrastructure, that automation and robotics of these facilities, very likely those companies will get scooped up by larger companies and pulled out of this area.
Right.
So I feel like there's definitely, and then that becomes, for us, how do we keep up with that skill set? So yes, robotics and automation, but then how does that play into things like interconnectivity, like industrial Internet of Things and cybersecurity and things like that? So, and then I think the other piece that some folks are starting to talk about is how does AI, play into
Oh,
all of this? How does AI play into programming a CNC machine? How does AI, be a part of that automation, cycle that we're talking? So
this is just huge, and it's just revolutionary to literally any aspect of anybody's career right now. As we look at robotics and AI and all of these emerging technologies that are coming at us like a tidal wave. So if you're out there and you're thinking about, like, if you're a younger person, you're thinking, do I just really want to go into manufacturing? Well, you have got to reframe what you're thinking, because when you go into manufacturing, these are careers that are evolving extremely fast as the advent of new technology comes into them. So if you like to do things and be out there and work on projects and work with your hands and stuff, but you also love technology, we're seeing a convergence of these so rapidly across all organizations. And Alex is exactly right. It is literally one of those things where we have to be aware that this is coming at us. And if we don't retool our organizations and our people's skill sets, then eventually they're going to phase out because somebody else is going to have already done those kinds of things. So it's fantastic that we've got organizations like the MVMC out there, forward thinking organizations, getting ready for these kinds of skill sets that need to be developed across the Mahoning Valley. Well, Alex, as we wrap up our time today, I want to thank you so much for being a guest. Everybody, we've been listening to Alex Hertzer tell us about the Mahoning Valley Manufacturers Coalition. And if you're ever been thinking about reaching out as a member company or as a potential person looking for a new job in manufacturing, now's the time to do that. Get started on the right direction. Today, we've covered a lot of ground, but it should be the right ground to really spark that interest to take that next step. A big thank you to Alex for joining us. And please, if you like today's episode, be sure to subscribe, like, and certainly share. Get the word out there across our community that this organization is here and ready to help you advance your career or your organization into the next century of workers and competitiveness. All right, listeners, take care.